Hello, I'm Michael Christensen, and I am here to do the author origin story tag. Because, as people probably know about me at this point, I am a big fan of superheroes, and this is a tag that makes me feel like a superhero. What more could I want, honestly? And the answer is nothing. This is literally all that I want. This tag was created by Evie Driver. You can find the original in the doobly-doo below. Let's get started. Question 1. Backstory. When and why did you start writing? How old were you? In which genres did you begin writing? My start was actually in screenplays and in high school, roughly, or middle school, probably. I mean, I had writing assignments and fiction assignments early on. I remember for one of them, I began just openly plagiarizing Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but with myself as the main character, and I'd like to think that a lot has changed since then. Probably less than I would like to admit, though. But in middle school and high school, I did some short films, and I did some videos for my church, and that's kind of how I got started with writing. Genre was generally comedy, which is why you'll probably never see most of them, because there weren't that many of them, but they were, they were a kid writing comedy. They probably weren't very good. Question 2, protagonists. What was your main character like? How have your tastes/muses changed since then? I did a video a couple of weeks ago about how to make your main character not boring, and I speak a little bit from experience there because my main characters used to be pretty boring. They were just generally nice guys who didn't have a lot of ambition, really. Much like myself for a fair portion of my life so far. And it wasn't until I started working on the superhero novel, and specifically when I trimmed the two main characters down to one, that I felt like my main character got really interesting, had a lot more energy and verve to them. Before that, my characters felt kind of generic. I had a real protagonist problem. Not an uncommon one, I think the same one that so many writers struggle with. Main characters are often reactive and passive and kind of boring. But I hope that I have shaken that a little bit by now. Question 3. Antagonist. What's the worst writing advice or feedback you ever got? What was your first rejection or confidence-breaking experience like? I'll answer the second part first. Probably the biggest confidence-breaking experience I had in my, up until my 20s was that everything that I wrote and then directed myself just came out bad. Back when I was still doing short films, up until probably when I was halfway through college, everything that I wrote and then directed, I think just came out to be not very good. I ended up doing a little experiment where I wrote something and that time I did not try to direct it so that I could see where the breakdown was, where the problem was. Was it in my writing or was it in the directing? The answer, as with so many things, turned out to be more complicated than I thought it was at the time. The writing may not have been the problem. I think the directing was a big issue there. But also writing-wise, I still had a lot to learn. The worst feedback I got, probably was in the early drafts of the superhero novel. And they were absolutely correct. They weren't exactly soul-breaking or soul-crushing. It was just this realization that I would have a lot of darlings to kill by the end of that draft. I am still working on killing those darlings, as is evidenced by the fact that it has taken me this long to get that book together. To quote Patrick Rothfuss, it's one thing to develop your craft and then build a house from scratch and have a really good house. It's another thing when you're working with a house that is in shambles and was not put together correctly and you are trying to reverse engineer a good house from the remains of an old one. As someone who's currently working on remodels to the place that they live, as well as completely restructuring my first book, I feel that. I got a lot of very considerate, but also ruthless notes on the superhero novel, and I'm still working on the best way to apply some of them, because I thought I had a fix, and the new draft, I just don't think it's there yet. I know it's not there yet. So I think I need to go back to the drawing board on a lot of aspects. It's painful. Superpower. What part of writing or the writing process do you feel is your greatest strength? Emotion, show versus tell, drafting, revising, character flaws, etc. For a long time I would have answered dialogue. That is definitely what I got the most compliments on when I was working on short films. But I think that part of the problem with my writing in the old days was that I was writing based on what I was ingesting, and what I was ingesting wasn't realistic dialogue, but heavily stylized. In college, my two biggest influences were probably Aaron Sorkin and Kevin Smith, and you can probably guess some of the stuff that I was writing when I was an amateur writer trying to ape those two writers. That is probably not going to yield the results that I was hoping for, and you'd be right. Now I think that I do think that my dialogue has a lot of strength to it. I think that I have a really good job of having my characters find clever turns of phrase. I think my characters communicate things clearly without hopefully doing too much exposition. I think that is something that I actually have benefited from moving into the form of prose instead of screenplays. Screenplays, I think, can get extremely overindulgent with dialogue, especially when I am writing them. But when you temper them with he said, she said, so-and-so had this thought based on what the first person said, you can break up the flow a lot better. And I think I can use that well to my advantage. I think that that is honestly one of my strengths. Also, I am very fast. I am a very fast drafter. I don't tend to be fast in the number of days because I end up missing a lot of days. I need to actually, develop a habit, develop a routine. But in terms of actual number of words per hour, pretty good, I think. Kryptonite. What part of writing or the writing process do you feel is your weakness? I mean, you could argue that it is revisions. That's certainly where I've been struggling the most on my current novel. But I would actually say my biggest issue is white room syndrome. It's an issue in every draft. No matter how many times I revise, it is still something that I struggle with. I think that is my weakness. Training montage. What strengths or weaknesses changed over the years? Additionally, what have you done over the years to better your craft? This is challenging because I haven't done as much with as many books as I would like to have. I think, like I said, I've gotten better at dialogue. I think I've gotten better at just how to write prose in general. I think I am getting better at having a clearer sense of perspective and tense. It's still something I struggle with sometimes. I still sometimes slip in and out of past versus present tense. But I think I've gotten better at differentiating between omniscient and subjective viewpoints. Weapon of choice. What programs have you used over your writing journey? What is your favorite right now and why? I used to use Final Drafts when I was writing screenplays. For the first novel, I spent a lot of time in Microsoft Word. A couple of years ago, I got to use Scrivener, and I started really using that a lot and really enjoying it. Right now, I don't have access to Scrivener, thanks to the old computer I used to write on being filled with water. So I'm actually really trying to figure out which program I'm going to be using going forward. I may have to switch back to using Microsoft Word. It's not my preference, but it is what I have access to right now. Or I might use Google Docs because I'm well acquainted with that system and I have access to it wherever I go. But probably my favorite thing that I'm using right now is actually I have some notebooks next to my bed that I use for world building. And it's really nice to be able to just roll over at night and write down a note and have it not necessarily be about the structure right now. It's literally about developing a system of magic or developing nations. And it's really nice to just roll over in bed and write down a note, especially when I'm not really thinking when I go to bed about structure or the pacing of a story. What I'm thinking about is the magic system or the dynamics or the factions at play. And I really like having those things handwritten because that's really useful to me to get these ideas out and kind of work them through. Trusted sidekick. Every Batman has his Robin. What is your favorite companion to cuddle or consume? Consume? You guys know Batman doesn't eat Rob while writing. Has this changed over the years? If so, does this also differ from daytime to nighttime? I mean, I'm boring. I don't have anyone around me when I write usually, and I tend to just drink a lot of water. I don't drink anything else, really. I don't drink coffee or tea or soda or juice. I'm trying to stop drinking milkshakes because it gives me tummy troubles. So it's just water. It's boring. Zero to hero. When you first began this journey, what level of success did you imagine for yourself? Is where you're currently at in your writing journey heading to that destination? If not, how has your dream evolved over the years? Look, we all imagine a level of success or notoriety for ourselves, and I don't know what's going to happen for me. I think that's what's changed over the years, is that I am just trying to create my own audience rather than assume that my book or adaptation or screenplay or whatever will be a big breakout hit. Instead, I'm working on developing the audience myself, and hopefully that will mean people are more engaged in my work and more willing to engage with me directly, especially if I end up self-publishing, which I think I'm definitely going to have to do a fair amount of. I mean, I'm writing superhero novels based on my own IP. That's not a very common market, so I'm either going to get very lucky with publishing or probably going to have to do some self-publishing on those. And if that's the case, that's what it's going to be, but I think focusing more on what I can control rather than my potential levels of success and notoriety is a little healthier. Remember my name. Fame! What authors helped you realize your interest or passion for writing? What books helped shape your writing style, genre of choice, or tastes? I mean, I've mentioned Neil Gaiman before, and he is an influence, but I'll also admit I haven't read a ton of his work. I do like that he does short stories. I think that's pretty uncommon, especially in mainstream publishing. I never pictured myself as a short stories person, but I do enjoy the format. I've only written a few, but I really like it. As far as style or genre, one of my biggest influences, I mentioned this before, is Austin Grossman's Soon I Will Be Invincible. It's a superhero story that takes itself just the right amount of seriously. I'm not talking about tone or genre, I'm talking about how things are presented in the narrative. Everything is discussed by the characters and even by the internal narration and the general narration as if we, the audience, are familiar enough with these characters that we don't need a lot of introduction. We don't need a lot of hand-holding. That sort of description where everything is assumed to be understood because it exists as part of the universe is hugely influential on me. I think that's where I really enjoy comparisons to things like Star Wars, because those first films don't give you a lot. They don't give you a ton of exposition. We don't need it. I think that you can explain things with your characters, and especially with just how things are presented in a matter-of-fact way, that the audience will follow along and be able to pay attention. So that's a big influence on me. Also, I read a lot of comics, so I like superhero stories, and I play a lot of D&D, so I like fantasy. That stuff's pretty basic. Marvel versus DC. I swear I did not name any of these. These are just what they're called. Comparison is dangerous. How has comparing your author journey to others dismantled or helped your own? Any advice to overcome this? I get where the original question asker is going with this. I think what they're implying is that it never really pays off to compare yourself to others. That's definitely why that second question is so leading. But I think that they wisely include the word helped there because sometimes it is useful to look at someone else's writing history and see what has worked for them. I think that's why I am interested in potentially self-publishing, and especially in my genre of choice, why I've already started producing content that could line up with that and make an audience involved in things that I like want to read the stories I write. You know, having podcasts or short stories out there online make someone more interested or invested in reading the things that I write, I hope. I think I get a little bit of that from Matt Colville. He's a D&D YouTuber who also writes books. He has 2 published books in a original fantasy series, and those are both available on Amazon through the self-publishing option, basically. And that used to be part of his call to action at the end of the videos. He used to say, you know, if you like me, if you like what I'm talking about, you might like my books, and they're available, and this is how much they cost, and it helps me this much. Before he was on Patreon, that's how we supported the channel, and I think there is a lot of logic to that. I have started thinking about a similar approach. I definitely thought about what I would do with short fiction being on Patreon or wherever else, and having that available to people, and basically saying, if you like this, you might like my books. I mean, I still got to finish those books, but that's definitely something I'm thinking a lot about. The obligatory love interest. Looking back on your earliest projects, what genres have you grown to love or hate to write? I think comedy I've probably soured a little bit on. I still enjoy comedy a lot, but I don't think that I am someone who needs or really wants at this point to write comedy in the same way that I thought I would when I was younger. I think that's because what I actually follow and focus on when I'm watching things or reading things has changed. I love comedy still, but it's not my go-to genre. My go-to genre these days are action, sci-fi, fantasy, superhero, etc. You know, still things that I think the kid version of me would really, really enjoy, but not exclusively comedic, things that have some comedic elements to them, but also treat themselves with a different level of seriousness or have a lot more world building and things like that. I don't hate comedy, I just don't think that I am a comedy writer the way that I used to when I was younger. ARCHNEMESIS. What are the most common excuses you've given yourself, or outside forces you've overcome, that prevented you from writing or crushed your confidence? There's a lot there to unpack, but also I've done a whole video about this before. I've done videos about overcoming writing resistance. I've done videos about overcoming procrastination. I think procrastination is the biggest enemy that I have, though. And a lot of it is excusable, a lot of it is legitimate in some form or another. You can always say that something is more important than your writing, but what you're basically doing there is deprioritizing your writing. I also give myself a pass for the global pandemic that happened. That, I think, was a reasonable excuse for not being in a very creative headspace. Superhero name. When you began, did you consider using a pen name? If you're using a pen name now, why did you decide to use one? If not, why did you use your real name? I honestly thought about this a lot back in high school. I thought about going by a shortened version of my name or having just my middle name instead of my last name. I opted to use my own name not only for reasons of vanity or narcissism, which I think are factors, but also decided to go with my full name because I think it looks better than Mike. I mean, I've gone by Mike since I was in first grade, but actually going by Michael as my writing name is, I think, better on a cover. I literally did cover mock-ups. I did mock-ups of what my superhero novel might look like or what my wizard novel might look like, and I put Mike Christensen, Michael T. Christensen on there. I went through a bunch of options. I ultimately decided on Michael T. Christensen because I think it is a little bit more flexible, honestly. Mike Christensen is great when I'm writing for younger audiences, and I will be writing a lot of middle grade, I think, but not exclusively. Having Michael on there is a little more versatile than just Mike. The T is for a lot of reasons. One, it's a little more prestigious, but also, honestly, it just helps break up the flow. Michael Christensen versus Michael T. Christensen, they just read differently. So I don't know. I mean, I played with a lot of versions. I showed them to my friends and family, and ultimately, Michael T. Christensen was just the clear winner. I hope the phrase Michael T. Christensen was a winner turns out to be some sort of foreshadowing for my career, but who knows? Final question, Avengers Assemble. Tag a few of your favorite people to do this tag on their channel. Look, I don't know. This tag is from 2019, and I don't even know who's done it or not, so I'm going to tag you. You should do this tag. Leave the link in the comments, or if you don't feel like doing the video yourself, that's fine. Just leave your answers in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you like the video, please hit the like button. That lets me know that I should do more videos like this. Subscribe if you haven't already. It is free, costs $0, and make sure to hit the bell. Thank you so much for watching. I love you, Victoria.